Okay, hi everybody. Today we're going to cover a topic which should be well known to pretty much anybody who hasn't had their head under the rock for the past 15 or 20 years or so. We're going to talk about ontological mathematics and its application to climate change and climate science. How fun, how exciting. We have got it figured out and we can show you how to apply ontological mathematical thinking to the climate science, climate change problem. So the title of this video is going to be Ontological Mathematics on Climate Science, a Practical Exposition. So of course this is for classical Illuminism, and it is based upon the philosophical idealist treatise by Mike Hockney et al. And all his related authors. So we read this and we read this numerous times in the Illuminism books. What do we read about fundamental premises over and over and over again across the God series books, across all of Mike Hockney's works and all of the other related authors? What do we read about fundamental premises? Can you say it in your mind before I get to it? What do we read? What do we know about fundamental premises? What is very, very important if you're going to argue things or extrapolate things and figure things out based on your premises? What needs to be happening with your premises? Well, if your fundamental premise is flawed, then everything which follows afterwards from it is in error, will be in error, okay? So that's very, very important concept in science, in philosophy, and thinking, just in general, right? If your fundamental premises are flawed, then everything you extrapolate, everything you follow afterwards from those premises are going to be flawed as well. We're going to carry that same error and just lead you into territory which doesn't make sense and has no bearing on ontological reality, right? So is it possible for, here's a question, is it possible for scientific materialism to make basic errors in mathematics? Is that possible? Of course that's possible, and of course it does if you've been reading the God series books. Of course you know it's possible for scientific materialism to make basic mistakes with mathematics and with interpreting mathematics. How could it not make mistakes when the official peer-reviewed position on on mathematics by science is that math is a miracle? That's literally, I mean, that sounds so incredible. It's almost shocking, right? It should actually be shocked. The first time you hear that as a layperson, you should be like, what? Science thinks that math is a miracle? What are you guys doing? Stop! You know what I mean? Right? So the official peer-reviewed position on mathematics by science is that math is a miracle. You can look it up. Eugene Wigner, Mike Hockney has quoted this Eugene Wigner fellow who wrote a scientific paper called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in Science. They call it unreasonable. They think that it's unreasonable that math works in science. And then in his paper, this paper by Eugene Wigner, he actually literally calls it a miracle. He literally uses the word a miracle and calls it a miracle. They're totally stumped. So they're using mathematics and they literally have no idea what it is. So can they make mistakes therefore with mathematics? If that's what their usage premises are in using mathematics, it's just a miracle that works. Yeah, of course, you're going to make some pretty significant mistakes and errors. Certainly that's going to happen. So I was told that illuminists can't understand or unable to understand what I've presented on this climate science, climate change problem, which I found rather shocking. So we'll see. I'm going to put you to the test and see if you can understand it. So remember, scientifically, what is ontological mathematics all about? What is the basic functional message for science? Can you state that yourself? What is the basic functional fundamental message from ontological mathematics for science, for the core sciences? What is it? Can you say it? What's the basic message? What's the basic message of ontological mathematics with regard to science? Okay, it's this. To get your math right, the foundations of your math need to be correct for your science to actually tell you about the world, right? That's what the whole God series are basically all about, through and through. Oh, of course, you know, as far as the scientific, as far as its interface to science, right? Well, that's the whole message to science. You have to get your math right, and the foundations of the math need to be correct, and you need to interpret the math. Not only interpret the math correctly, you also have to have good, proper foundations for the math, the proper equations, the correct equations, all that sort of stuff, right? So that's the basic message. Okay, so now we are going to get to your test. So I'm going to show a bunch of diagrams here. So these diagrams are from peer-reviewed literature, they're from textbooks, and they're from university teaching material for undergraduate introductory courses on climate science, even sometimes in astrophysics. And so these diagrams, these 6 different diagrams, they're called energy budget diagrams. So what does that mean? So it just means that they're just diagrams which mathematically show how all of the energy coming into the Earth from the sun is equal to the energy going out back into space from the Earth. And that's conservation of energy, because the Earth produces no energy of its own, right? The only energy the Earth is getting is the energy from the sun. The sun is generating energy through nuclear fusion, splitting apart atoms, liberating free energy. So the sun is an actual real source of energy, raw power. That energy comes to the Earth, and then these diagrams are basically a little depiction of, okay, all the sun energy coming to the Earth has to equal all the energy leaving the Earth going back out into space, because that's the only energy available. So it's conservation of energy, right? Just a little logical principle. Okay, so these are diagrams of the Earth. Okay, so here's a diagram of the Earth. Here's sunlight coming in and then energy going out from the Earth. Here's a professor who has drawn the Earth on the chalkboard. You see how he's drawn the Earth there? There he drew the Earth. There he drew the Earth with some air on top of it. That's what's going on inside that diagram. Okay, here's a diagram that shows the Earth. Here's a diagram with the Earth. Here's the Earth from the University of Washington. Okay, like, remember this one's Harvard up here, University of Chicago, Columbia University, Pennsylvania State. American Meteorological Society has the same thing. They have all the same numbers in here, like if you had to look closely, and I go into my books in detail and I explain, this is all the same thing going on. The numbers are all the same. The math means all the same thing. They're doing the same thing. It's an energy budget diagram, right? Okay, so now that you see the Earth here, I'll give you a minute. Do you see anything wrong? You can do it with a pretty much, I think online on the Facebook page, I called this a kindergarten problem in ontological mathematics, and comprehending ontological mathematics and being able to apply it. Okay. So do you see anything wrong? I'll give you a few minutes. Maybe you can pause it or something. I don't know. Do you see anything wrong? It doesn't require you looking at the math. It doesn't require you crunching any numbers or anything like that. You just have to see if there's anything wrong. Do you see any problems with these diagrams? Okay. So, just to go over it again. Here's a professor. He drew the Earth here. He drew the Earth here with air on top of it. Harvard University drew the Earth. Columbia University drew the Earth. See, they have the Earth there, right? See anything wrong? All right, well, let's switch to a model that I made. So here's a model that I made. Again, don't worry about the math, but here's the Earth. And I mean, if you want to look at the math, go right ahead, but here's the math, and here's how the math works out for it, So just take a look at that for a second. Do you see anything that's different? Anything register as being different to you? Maybe it would be important. Maybe it has something to do with mathematics. Maybe it has something to do with how you would work the mathematics out. Do you see anything at all? Okay. You don't have to be able to do the mathematics yourself. You just have to comprehend the overall, aspect of what's happening here, right? Okay, so let's continue. So does it make a difference? So here's my model on the left, and here's the traditional model on the right that they use in climate science. So does it make a difference? Yes, it makes a difference. And what is the difference? It's this. They're using a flat line as the Earth. They're drawing the Earth as a flat plane. Is the Earth a flat plane? No, the Earth is a round sphere, right? Now, does it make a mathematical difference? Yes, it makes a mathematical difference. Does it establish a mathematical foundation? Absolutely, it establishes a mathematical foundation. Geometry is mathematics. A flat plane is a mathematical object. A round sphere is a different mathematical object. Is it going to make a difference for how the math then gets worked out? Of course it's going to make a difference for how the math gets worked out. They're not the same thing. They're different math. It's math. They're both math. And that's as far as science takes it. Well, they're both math, so they're both the same. But in fact, they're different math. One's correct ontological math, and one's not ontological. So think about this in terms of ontological mathematics. What does ontological mean? What does ontological mathematics mean? It means using math that corresponds to how existence actually exists. to what the structure of existence actually is, right? So if you use the math for a flat Earth, is that ontological mathematics? Is that mathematics ontological? The answer would have to be no, because the Earth is not a flat plane, right? So do you see this very practical understanding? The way that we could use this to teach to kindergartners the concept of ontological mathematics, right? The real Earth is actually a sphere, right? Earth is a round sphere, and there's math that works out for that. And that's different than the math for a plane. Now, which math would be the better math to use? Which math would be the ontological math to use? Well, obviously the math which goes along with Earth being a sphere, since Earth is a sphere, yes, that would be ontological mathematics, right? So this is a very practical demonstration of the concept of ontological mathematics. You have to use mathematics, which corresponds to what actually exists, to the structure of existence in physics as it actually occurs, right? Do you get the idea? Now, does it make a difference? Of course, you can read in my books. I've gone into detail. I do have a little bit of math, but not too much. Mostly my first one, my second two books don't have any math, but maybe one does. Anyway, not important. Which one? Does it make a difference? Yes, it does make a difference. So let's start with the climate science version, okay? And so yeah, just to make the point, this flat Earth is how climate is understood. It sets the foundation for understanding how the climate works in climate science and in science. That's the foundation. That's why there were 6, and there's many more. I just had 6 on that one slide back there. But it's universal. It's how it's taught universally in the academic and in the climate science sort of apparatus or whatever. That's how it's taught. That's your introductory, and that's your introduction, your introductory course on how to understand the climate is with these flat Earth models. So what are the consequences? There's mathematical consequences which are different than if you treat it as a sphere, the Earth as a sphere. So what are the differences? If you treat the Earth as a sphere, the math works out that the sun creates the climate. Now, if you use the traditional, what they're doing in climate science and in standard science, the way that the math works out, and it just works out this way, I demonstrate this in my books, why the math works out this way, but it works out that the sun doesn't create the climate. If you use a flat Earth mathematical model, which is not ontological, because it doesn't represent what the Earth actually is, right? Error goes to error. You start with flawed premises, then you end with flawed premises, right? So the starting initial premise in climate science is they use this flat Earth diagram, right? And they think that it's fine because they say, well, it's an average. And you can say, but then the ontological mathematical response to that is to say, okay, yeah, sure, you've made an average of something. You've made a mathematical structure which you call an average. Good for you. Does it represent reality? Is it ontological? You know, the climate scientists and the scientists try to get away with it, and they just say, well, this represents the average. This flat Earth model, it just represents the average, because on average, the Earth gets sunlight all over it. It's like, okay, well, sort of, but, you know, also on average, one side of the Earth only ever at a time is actually only ever getting sun. Sun doesn't shine over the entire surface area of the Earth all at once over the whole surface area. The sun only shines on half of the surface area of the Earth, right? So even though you guys are creating something you call an average and you're trying to justify it because you're saying that it's math, and because it's a math average, it's valid, well, okay, you've done that in math, but is it ontological? It's not ontological, is it? Right? So flawed premises, flawed fundamental premises, this flat Earth math. What's one of the first consequences? The first consequence in the math is that the sun can't create the climate. So that the sun is too cold. That's literally what the math does to your model, what the flawed math does. The sun can't create the climate. And then you have to postulate another thing, which they call the greenhouse effect, which isn't even real, where then the climate creates itself out of nothing. And they reverse the output for the input. Basically what happens is they have completely inverted reality. And another consequence is that the output of the Earth, and the Earth is only minus 18 degrees Celsius. That's the average temperature of the Earth. So if you were to measure the temperature of the Earth from space at a distance with a sensor that can measure temperature from a distance like that, you would measure that the Earth is minus 18 degrees Celsius. Well, would you expect the Earth to be the temperature of the sun? No, of course you wouldn't. The sun is a nuclear ball of fusion, right? So the Earth isn't going to be the same temperature as the sun. Of course, the Earth is much colder. The Earth is minus 18 degrees Celsius. But then what they do, because these scientists, these materialist scientists, don't understand math, they don't understand ontological math. They understand math, but not ontological math. They say, well, it's the same energy leaving as the same energy coming in. And because we're just making an average, we can just use the energy leaving as the energy coming in and say that it's equal, as if it's over the whole surface. So they use this output, which is only minus 18 degrees Celsius, and they use that as the input. And they say that that's equivalent. Well, is it equivalent? Well, of course it's not equivalent. The sun is hot. The incoming sunshine is hot. Incoming sunshine, when you use a round Earth model, you use the sunshine as it actually is. That's the thing. If you use the round Earth model, then you can use sunshine as it actually really empirically, physically is. And that power, that temperature of sunlight coming in is 121 degrees Celsius. It's very, very hot, hot enough to boil water. If you could do such a thing with that. So sunlight coming in is very, very hot. Now, this flat Earth model, which they start with, forces them to use incoming sunshine as only minus 18 degrees Celsius. That's what that term works out to. See that term right there? It's the same term as right here, which is an output. But because of their flawed premises of flat Earth, the way that the math works out is that you then have to use the output as the input. So in fact, you completely reject the sun. You completely get rid of the sun from creating the climate. But now with the Earth only being minus 18 degrees Celsius, then the climate scientists say, gosh, if only minus 18 degrees Celsius in our model, in this math model we have, is coming in from the sun, minus 18 degrees Celsius is really cold. How does Earth have a climate? How does Earth have a climate at all if the sun is only minus 18 degrees Celsius coming on the Earth, heating on the Earth? That can't even melt ice. That can't even, evaporate water, create clouds or anything. Well, then they create this greenhouse effect, which is carbon dioxide. They say that carbon dioxide then creates the climate. Now that's convenient, isn't it? Because now they're going to start taxing carbon dioxide and vilify it, right? So do you see how the errors just start compounding? And I'll get into that in a moment here on this side here. But just to get in a bit more into this. So the model I have tried to present to climate science, and you should read my book. You should read my book, Planet Wars, especially, and see what happened. I submitted this model, this alternative model for teaching. I said we should teach the foundation of climate science with a spherical Earth. Because when you do that, you can use the sun as it actually is. Because here, on what they're doing is they're using a flat Earth. Well, the Earth obviously isn't flat, so they're teaching the Earth not as it actually is. And then the consequence of that is that they have to use the sun input, the solar input heating, not as it actually is. As a consequence, with a round Earth, you can use the Earth as it actually is, a round sphere, and you get to use sunlight as it actually is. Really hot, plus 121 degrees Celsius, enough to create the climate. Think of that heat all around the equator, evaporating all that water on the oceans, or evaporating all that water over land, creating towering cumulonimbus clouds. The power of sunlight has the power to raise entire lakes worth of energy, worth of water into the sky, 20,000 feet. Think of how much energy and force that requires. Think of how much work and energy it requires to raise a lake from the ground and tower it up to 30,000 feet in a thunderhead cloud. That takes an awful lot of work. And you need sunlight that's hot to do that because it drives that evaporation. Well, you need really hot sunlight at 120 degrees Celsius to do that. That can explain it. But their consequence of using flat Earth is that solar heating is only minus 18 degrees Celsius. Minus 18 degrees Celsius can't create a towering cumulonimbus cloud. So then they say that carbon dioxide does it. Yeah, it's really that simple. That's what it is. So do you get the idea here? You're starting to comprehend the idea behind ontological math. Is math which corresponds with reality, and non-ontological math, the way that scientific materialism uses it, doesn't correspond with reality, and they don't seem to care, and they don't notice. Now, I submitted a paper I was telling you about this, saying we should teach the Earth as it actually is, a sphere, and sunlight as it actually comes in, rather than this abstract model, even though you call it an average. I'm pretty sure that I know you justify it calling it an average. Sure, go ahead and call it an average. Well, can't we alternatively just, why not? Give it a try. Let's just say the Earth is a sphere. Why not? You can teach it as a sphere. I mean, I know that they have their preference for teaching it as a flat plane and sunshine being cold. Okay, good. You justify that, saying that it's an average. Okay, go ahead. Is there something wrong with me saying that the Earth, wanting to say, suggest that the Earth is a sphere and that we can use sunlight as it actually is at 120 degrees? There's nothing wrong with me saying that and wanting to teach that. Instead, is there? Well, you should read in my book what the responses were. I tested it. I experimented. I submitted this model with appropriate scientific text, which I have in my book, Planet Wars, explaining why we should use this model in a very scientific way, not confrontational, not like, a professional scientific paper, right? And you should see the responses. They literally say it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling what the responses are. They say that I have no evidence that it makes a difference. They say that I should have peer-reviewed references to the Earth being round. And that without supplying that, my paper can't, and my new model can't be taken seriously. And it goes on and on. I have a whole bunch of responses that are mind-boggling, that are literally mind-boggling. And so I spend then the rest of the book explaining how science has gotten into this state. And of course, I have to apply Illuminism and the knowledge of Illuminism and ontological mathematics, plus some other extrapolations, which you will really enjoy reading about, in order to explain how it is that the mind of scientists have become so cuckoo that they can't appreciate that there's a difference between the Earth being round and the Earth being flat. There has to be an explanation for that, right? So of course, you've been reading the Illuminism books, the ontological mathematics books for a long time now, right? Of course we expect the scientific mind to not be able to understand basic things anymore. Of course their usage of mathematics is completely bastardized and meaningless. Of course we know all that, right? So here is a wonderful example of that in action. So just another couple points. The round model is consistent with thermodynamics, the thermodynamic laws. Very important. I mean, thermodynamics is probably the most important thing that there is to humanity. It's empirically true. It's empirically consistent, observable, because that's what you empirically observe, is the Earth being round. Well, actually, I mean, empirically with your eyes, you view the Earth being flat, actually, right? But empirical truth, the Earth is round, right? Obviously, the Earth is round. Anyway, it's not acceptable to scientific peer review. They will reject it. They will reject if you say that the Earth is round and that it makes a difference, right? So in the traditional model, what they're doing in climate science, yes, so the climate creates itself out of nothing. The sun doesn't create the climate at all. The sun is written right out of the climate. It's mathematically, physically, and theoretically equivalent to flat Earth theory. It's a flat Earth. It's a flat line. What do you call that? It's inconsistent with thermodynamic law. It actually violates thermodynamic law in a basic way, which I discuss, of course, in my books. It's empirically fictional. Of course, that's a fiction. That's not what the Earth is. It doesn't look like a flat plane. That's not what you observe. Sure, you observe that with your eyes, and maybe that's the trick, right? Maybe that's what they're tricked in because they're scientific materialists, right? Because they see, if you use your eyes, if you're out for a hike anywhere, you see a flat plane. And so maybe it's just as simple as that. That's why the scientific materialists, the sensing types, just can't get it. Because they go for a walk outside. I mean, in theory, sure, they know that the Earth is a sphere. I mean, they know that. But on the other hand, their sensing mind sees the Earth as a flat plane. And so they see nothing wrong with using math for a flat plane Earth. And they don't understand that you can't actually extend that to the whole Earth. The whole Earth isn't a flat plane. What you see around you in the horizon, yeah, that's a flat plane, approximately, sure. But because they're a sensing type, they just don't get that you can't, treat the whole Earth at once as a flat plane. You see how their sensing mind, their sensing scientific materialist mind has totally tricked them on this. I mean, it's wonderful. What a wonderful exposition, right? Anyway, so they come up with this greenhouse effect idea, which they say is how a greenhouse works. Anyway, it's in my books. It's not how a greenhouse works. It has nothing to do with how a greenhouse works. In fact, a real greenhouse that you grow plants in, they actually, if you do the measurements, they actually empirically, totally experimentally refute what they are calling a greenhouse effect in their little scheme here. This greenhouse effect, right? So the point is that they create this greenhouse effect to create the climate because their premise is that the sun can't create the climate because in their math, the sun is only minus 18 degrees Celsius. That's not, when it comes to the Earth heating on the Earth, that's not enough to create the climate. So then they create a thing that they call the greenhouse effect. which isn't actually how a real greenhouse functions or works, but they call it that anyway, which is kind of another trick, right? And so, so this greenhouse effect is what creates the climate, and then from there, it's carbon dioxide that creates a greenhouse effect, and then from there we got to vilify carbon dioxide and tax it and do all this crazy things with it. So the political consequences are vilifying the life-creating gas, carbon dioxide, CO2 as a pollutant. Now, you might not appreciate this, but all life is based on carbon dioxide. Do you know that? What's the basis of DNA? The molecular basis, the molecule which allows DNA to work is carbon because of its 4 valence shell electrons. It's all life is based on carbon. Now, how does carbon get into DNA? How do you get carbon as the molecule into DNA, into the biology, into the biological chemical reactions? How do you get carbon into the DNA? Do you know where it comes from? It comes from carbon dioxide, from plants, from photosynthesis, from sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's what allows photosynthesis to work. That's what converts carbon dioxide from the atmosphere eventually into DNA, into molecular DNA. That's how it works. It's the life-creating gas. Carbon dioxide is a life-creating gas, and guess what? It's not toxic. Do you know, I mean, you may not know this, but in greenhouses where we grow food, do you know that we pump the level of carbon dioxide in those greenhouses to 5 times the outdoor level? Because that's what plants like, because that's in fact how plants evolved. Plants evolved in the past. There's been way more. We are right now at a dearth of CO2 in the atmosphere. We're at one of the lowest points in history, even with it having risen for some reason in the last 50 years. We're still at an extremely low concentration level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in geological terms. Plants prefer a much higher level. And here's another thing. At the end of the last ice age, about 10,000 years ago, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was getting so low that photosynthesis could stop. You don't have to go to 0 carbon dioxide for photosynthesis to stop. Photosynthesis stops being able to function at somewhere at like half the level that carbon dioxide is at now. So if you went down to only half of where we are now, photosynthesis would stop. So photosynthesis stops. I mean, surely you're aware, right? Photosynthesis is the basis of all life on Earth. That's where it starts, right? That's where it starts with plants, with algae. And then, you know, of course, animals eat the plants and other animals eat the animals, right? It all starts with carbon dioxide and photosynthesis, right? So they're vilifying this life-creating gas as a pollutant. It's not a pollutant. Like I said, in real greenhouses, we put the concentration in industrial food production greenhouses. They're pumped to 5 times the outdoor level, and that carbon dioxide is trapped inside that greenhouse to help the plants grow, because that's what plants love. And in the past, it's been way higher even than 5 times. It's been way higher, and humans can work in that no problem. It doesn't get toxic until you're at like 50 times the current outdoor level or something like that, right? A concentration which would simply never occur, never be able to occur. Okay, so what else are they doing? They're geoengineering the atmosphere to get rid of CO2. I have in my book a few examples. There's this Israeli firm which is genetically engineering a bacteria to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Guys, what's the consequence of that? Guys, what happens if you release? Look at the pandemic we just went through, right? Supposedly. Something was released, spread all over the world uncontrollably, right? What happens if you release a bacteria that lives off CO2 that's going to just spread all over the entire world uncontrollably and do what? Suck all the CO2 out of the air. What's the consequence of that? Do you get how important the consequences of not doing ontological mathematics is now? They're doing non-ontological mathematics in climate science, and the consequence of that is that they're going to suck all the CO2 out of the air. And the result of that is a permanent and final total global extinction of all life on Earth. Not an extinction level event, a total extinction level event. And that's a consequence of using the wrong math. Are you an ontological mathematician? Do you understand the difference between correct math and wrong math? Do you understand that there might be a difference between the math for a sphere and how that works with energy from the sun versus a flat plane and how that would have to work with energy from the sun? The math works out differently. And like we said, fundamental premises, if your fundamental premises are flawed, then they go and create other false conclusions, right? Geoengineering the sky to blot out the sun. You see articles like this frequently, right? They're going to start putting particulates of various kinds to blot out the sun. So they're going to do both of these. Do you think that both of those things at the same time are good for life on Earth? One, let's get rid of the carbon dioxide. Two, while we're doing that, let's blot out the sun. Do you think that that's an environmental policy? Do you think that that's an environmentally friendly policy to suck the carbon dioxide out of the air, which plants love, which create all life on Earth, which plants, in fact, want more of, but we're going to get rid of it to stop photosynthesis. And then while we're doing that, we're going to blot out the sun. Do you think plants like the sun? Do you think this Earth is dependent on sunlight at all? Do you see the scale? Now, I describe this and I get into this in detail in the book Planet Wars, and I explain what the scale that we're facing is. The scale being the complete destruction of life on Earth from these scientific materialists who don't understand what's wrong with math worked out for flat Earth theory. It is the biggest stakes imaginable, and it literally comes down to applied ontological mathematics. Do you get it? We are talking about the end of all life on Earth as a consequence of not using ontological mathematics. Do you get how important it is to use ontological mathematics now? Do you get it? I was told that illuminists can't fucking understand this. Are you fucking kidding me? You fucking assholes. What fucking asshole said that to me? You can't fucking understand it? You can't fucking understand you've been reading the God series books in Illuminism for 10 fucking years? And you can't understand the difference between fucking flat earth math? You fucking cocksuckers. God, you fucking pricks. Right. So yes, alternative energy. You should actually watch that movie, Planet of the Humans. They actually do a really good job explaining what this alternative energy, what these things do. They're so destructive. They're so disgusting. They're doing this biofuel thing. Oh, biofuel. It's what's that term that they use? It's sustainable. It's sustainable because do you know what they're using for biofuel? It's the most sickening thing that you can possibly imagine. They're chopping down forests and putting them in incinerators, and they're burning forests down for energy and calling that a better alternative than to what? Than to use clean natural gas. Do you know what the output of natural gas is? Water vapor. Nothing wrong with water vapor. The planet loves water vapor. It's full of it. And carbon dioxide. Plants love carbon dioxide. Burning natural gas is the best freaking thing to do. It makes water vapor and carbon dioxide. Where does that carbon dioxide go? It goes straight into the forest and builds trees. That's what burning natural gas and even coal. Coal you can clean now. Yeah, sure. At some point in history, yes, burning coal was dirty. Fine. We've cleaned that up a long time ago. We know how to burn coal in a clean way. What's the output of coal? Same thing, basically. Water and carbon dioxide. And where did that carbon dioxide go? Straight into the forest to building a forest. How fucking wonderful is that? That's great. That'd be fucking wonderful. Instead, they're stopping that, sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere, blotting out the sun, and then they're creating alternative energy that's sustainable and chopping forests down, entire forests down, and burning them as fuel for energy for people to fucking be on the internet with. I go into my book and I explain what we're facing and who's doing it. Planet Wars. We're facing a threat from outside this planet that's trying to destroy this entire planet, basically. There, I'll just give it away, okay? They're trying to destroy all life on this Earth. They want to take over this planet. That's all I'll say. You should read the book for the details. So loss of cheap energy to alleviate poverty, right? Fossil fuels, all that sort of stuff. You know, it's nice, cheap energy. Do as I say, not as I do. So all these retarded elite leaders, politicians, celebrities, all these other morons, right? They're always telling you to not use energy while they're flying around, you know, totally living this these disgusting lives of excess, just absurd levels of excess, right? Okay, so don't be offended, be angry. The test. So could you see that the math was being worked out for flat earth theory and that this is what would generate incorrect results? Okay, well, so like I said, you've been following. Now, just don't feel bad about yourself when I say this for a second, because we're going to follow up, okay? So just, you've been following AC, Armageddon Conspiracy, Pythagorean Illuminism, reading the God series books of Mike Hockney, calling yourself an Illuminist for 10 years, yet you can't perform the mental math and the geometry of distinguishing a flat line from a sphere. So an Illuminist can't do that? Give me a fucking break. All right, so here's the thing though. Don't be mad at me for saying that about you. Don't sulk and feel bad about it. It's not you. This is the state of our world. This is the state of science. This is why Mike Hockney wrote 200 fucking books. It's what the world and what science has done to you. It's what your education system has done to you. It's made our minds. So I'm almost like the only person in the world who's fucking written this and pointed this out and tried to do something about it, right? This is the state of our education system. The state of our education system, the state of science is that flat earth theory is now in modern science and they can't tell what's wrong with it because they think it's just a mathematical average, so that's okay. And they have no concept of ontological mathematics. That mathematics actually needs to correspond to what exists for it to make sense. Yeah, it is insulting. Sorry if I insulted you, but it is fucking insulting. The point of insulting you is that it is insulting. And it's not me insulting you. It's this whole goddamn system. It is insulting. The state of the world, the state of academic science's understanding of mathematics is that it can't tell what's wrong with flat earth theory, and the consequence of that is that it's going to destroy all life on Earth. You think there's no fucking practical application of ontological mathematics? There's no practical meaning, no practical example? It can't get any more practical than this, okay? All right. I think that's it. Okay, hopefully you understood that. Hopefully you get a practical, hopefully, well, whatever. Okay, all right. Take care, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, maybe we can do an AMA sometime. We can do it live. If you have questions about, okay, well, climate scientists say this, well, just it's all bullshit. Just throw it all out, right? It's that thing. Fundamental premises are flawed. If the fundamental premises are flawed, everything that follows is flawed likewise. So just throw it all out. You don't have to ask me. Climate science says this. Well, what do you think? Just throw it all out. Don't even bother. I mean, what? Okay, fine. If you want to, go ahead, ask me. I can give you the answer, right? But generally, your position now should be just throw it all out. Just throw it all out, start over. Actually, I made that point going back to the education. I make that point in my book too about our education system. Can we say that we have, now that you've learned this and you saw this, can we say that we have an education system? Can we really say that we have an education system? If a person can go through kindergarten and spend 20 years of life or 25 years of life and end up as a PhD in physics or astronomy, astrophysics, or climatology, and they don't know what's wrong with the math worked out for flat earth theory, do we have an education system? We don't have an education system. There's no education happening in the world. There's none. There's literally none. We should literally just stop. Our whole education system should just stop. We should just stop. Because it's obviously not teaching anyone. I don't know how many of you couldn't tell what the problem was. Don't feel bad about it. It's not you. It's how you've been fucked over. Okay? You were Even though you've been reading the God series and you're a supporter of ontological mathematics, you still couldn't tell what was wrong with a flat line versus a sphere. That's not you being dumb. You're a smart person. You're a very smart person if you're reading the God series books. That's what's been done to you. That's what's been done to your mind. Okay? That's why I said it's kindergarten entry level stuff, because eventually this will be taught in kindergarten. And we will teach what the scientific materialists and the sensing types tried to do to our world because they couldn't understand the basic concept of ontological mathematics, that your math has to mean something. It can't just be like it is in quantum mechanics where it means 50 different things and they can't tell which one it means. It has to mean something. You have to be able to figure out the one true thing that it means. Okay? But because math is in that state, because science's approach to math is that one, it's a miracle, and two, you can interpret it however you want. Well, of course, the direct consequence of that is that they can't tell what's wrong with flat Earth theory. I mean, isn't this the most absurd thing? That flat Earth theory is in modern physics. That flat Earth theory is what modern science is bringing to politics as the most important thing that science has done in the current age for politics, for mass consumption. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.